By the time the funeral ended, the family had already started dividing the room into invisible territories. Older relatives gathered near the coffee urns, speaking softly about medications, hospice timelines, weather. The younger cousins stayed near the hallway, checking phones between condolences. And near the front pews, closest to the flowers and framed photographs, sat the people who believed grief gave them authority. His father was one of them. He stood with a hand resting on the back of a chair, accepting sympathy like someone hosting an event he hadn't wanted but still intended to manage properly. The grandson stayed mostly near the edges of the church, not hiding, just unclaimed. People nodded politely when passing him, though several seemed startled he had come at all. Most remembered him as distant, the one who moved away, the one who never quite settled into the family version of success. Years earlier, an aunt had described him as hard to understand. What she really meant was difficult to display. As conversations shifted slowly from mourning toward logistics, his father approached him beside the side entrance, where cold air slipped through the old wooden doors. She always said you were the disappointment of the family. The remark arrived with a smirk too small to challenge directly. Casual enough to deny later if necessary, the grandson looked at him quietly, then nodded once. Did she? His father shrugged. You know how she was. No argument followed. That unsettled his father more than anger would have. 10 minutes later, the estate attorney stepped toward the podium near the altar and asked everyone to remain seated for the reading of a final addendum attached to the will. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as relatives settled back down with visible impatience. The grandson remained standing in the rear until the attorney looked directly at him. She requested that you read the final paragraph personally. A flicker passed through the room then. Small but noticeable, he walked forward slowly. Aware now of people watching him with fresh curiosity rather than dismissal, the attorney handed him a folded page. His grandmother's handwriting covered the bottom half. For a moment he simply stared at it. Then he read aloud. To my favorite grandson, I leave the house, the jewelry, and the $200,000 life insurance payout. The rest can fight over the leftovers. Silence followed immediately, not dramatic silence. Administrative silence, the kind that appears when people mentally recalculate reality faster than emotion can catch up. One cousin actually laughed once under his breath before stopping abruptly. His father's face lost color so gradually it almost looked like exhaustion instead of shock. The attorney spoke next, calm and procedural. The addendum has already been verified and notarized according to state requirements. Authority entered the room quietly but completely in that moment. No debate followed because there was nothing available to argue with. The grandson folded the paper carefully and handed it back. Then he walked out through the side doors into the cold afternoon air before anyone could reorganize themselves emotionally. The calls started that evening. An uncle who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years left a voicemail about keeping the family connected. A cousin suddenly remembered childhood summers fondly. His father texted twice without mentioning the will directly. First, call me, then later. Don't forget we're family. That message sat unread for hours. Inside the inherited house, the grandson moved slowly from room to room, turning on lamps one at a time. The place smelled faintly like tea and old books. Nothing looked staged for death. A half-finished crossword still sat beside the recliner. Reading glasses rested upside down near the kitchen sink. Grief finally reached him there, not during the funeral, not during the will, there because the house still felt occupied by her habits. Over the next week, more truth surfaced quietly. The grandmother had apparently updated the will 2 years earlier, after one of her hospital stays. Around that same time, the grandson had started visiting every Thursday evening after work. No one else knew because he never announced it. He fixed loose cabinet hinges, replaced groceries, drove her to appointments when she stopped feeling comfortable on highways. Sometimes they barely talked. Once, while changing a porch light bulb, he overheard her telling a neighbor, "He's the only one who comes here without needing something." At the time, he pretended not to hear. Now the memory sat differently. 3 days after the funeral, he found the note. It had been tucked inside a recipe book beneath loose papers in the kitchen drawer. Just one paragraph in uneven handwriting. I should have defended you more openly while I was alive. I thought loving you quietly was enough. It wasn't. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time after reading it. Outside, evening settled softly against the windows. His phone buzzed again somewhere in another room, probably family, probably another attempt to rebuild closeness now that the inheritance had rearranged everyone's attention. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened one of the lower drawers near the stove, looking for tape. Inside were dozens of old birthday cards, made from folded notebook paper and cheap crayons. Every crooked childhood drawing he barely remembered giving her had been preserved carefully in stacks tied together with ribbon. He picked one up slowly. A paper astronaut, 3rd grade, maybe 4th. Across the front, in uneven handwriting, it said, "For Grandma." Sorry it's messy. Behind him, the old house creaked gently as the heater turned on. And for the first time since the funeral, he understood the inheritance was never really about money at all.